Hello, and welcome to Nostalgia K Review. I'm Stephen Ray, and today I'm talking about the band ROUAGE. So, ROUAGE was a band that was formed in Nagoya, and they're a visual kei band, but primarily, more or less, they're kind of categorized as what's called Nagoya Kei, which is the term, and bands that came out of that particular part of Japan. And that particular part of Japan is kind of more industrial part. And Nagoya Kei is more associated with kind of the darker image and music and undertones and whatnot. So this is their first album, and it was their indies album. And it's released under the Yambanya label. And the band at the time when this album was released consisted of 5 members. So you had Kazushi on vocals, Rika on guitar, Reiji on guitar, Kaiki on bass, and Shono on drums. So, and this album was self-produced by the band itself, and it says directed by Mr. Watani and recorded at Mutech. So it was recorded at one studio. And so they released this album and got pretty popular really quick, and had several singles and lives and even indies lives, so forth. And much to their success, they ended up getting signed to Mercury Music Entertainment, which is Mercury Records Japan, which was owned by Polygram. So Mercury had a label there. So this is their major label debut, Bible. Bible is pretty much a hard-hitting, stellar album from beginning to end. Contains the singles Original Sin, Queen, Overflow, Jesus Phobia, Vice, From Zephyr, Bible, Promise, and Reborn. And there's 2 other Japanese tracks that are on there. The 3rd track and then the 8th track, which I'm not able to pronounce. So you have those tracks. Unfortunately, with this copy, I wasn't able to retain any of the liner notes because it was a rental copy. So I was pretty much buying it as is off of eBay at the time. I bought this when I was like 16, 17 or something like that. So, but it's a solid album. It's one of my favorites. I really love it. I believe it's probably self-produced, but I could be wrong. So who knows? Even has the sticker from behind there when it was scanned in. People would, I guess they would go to, little bookshops in Japan, and like this one says 1 week rental. So you could rent CDs. If you weren't able to purchase a disc, you're able to at least rent a album and listen to it. So, which was really cool at that time. That's kind of a unique concept for Japan. Kind of reminds me of, you're basically kind of going to the library. So this is an essentially it's a library copy, if you would think of it from that standpoint. So after Bible, they released, I had these tours, and they released a live video of that concert, and it's all up on YouTube. I watched it several times, listened to it several times. It's really awesome. You can check that out. And they had 2 other albums that they released in 1997, and that was a huge year for them. So the first album being was called Mind, and then there's another album called Children. So they're kind of released back to back. and they were just consistently working all the time, touring, playing, making music. And I think, you know, we can kind of guess later on what's to happen next. So come 1998, they released Soup. And then again, this is a, what I'm holding here is a reissue from 2007. So this is not under the Mercury label, but this is the one that has, this is one of the only albums that I own by them, other than the very first album that has all the original liner notes in it. So it's their, according to this is their fourth album, which contained the singles Angel Fish and Endless Loop. Angel Fish was a huge single for them. Endless Loop was pretty big. This album is kind of a hit and miss for me. I like it. It's good. It's got some good tracks in it. My favorite tracks are Endless Loop, Black Box, Angel Fish. Let's see. The third track's pretty decent. The eighth track is good as well. The rest of the tracks are in Japanese. But as you can see, it's got, lovely photo of the band there of Kazushi, Reizi, Rika, and Shono. And I like the kind of the uniqueness of this album, the way it was designed. So basically, all the tracks were arranged by producer Akira Nishihara. It was co-produced by him. So he also played keyboards. So, as I mentioned before, I don't know if I mentioned this. So there consists of 4 members. So originally they had 5 members. Now, at one point in the very beginning, the bassist ended up leaving the group. And so they resulted to being a 4-piece instead of one of the guitarists dropping the guitar, like Laputa's example. They just continued on as a 4-piece, but with vocals, 2 guitars, and drums. So from the first 3 albums or first 4 albums on, they always had like either a sessions bassist or somebody like that would come in to play bass, and then sometimes Rika would pick up the bass and play a bass track as well. So on this album, on Soup, the bassist, track 4 is Tetsu Yoshida, Shinichi Hisanaga on track 6, and Rika did all the rest of the bass work. So you could tell that primarily Rika is not a bassist. He's mostly a guitarist, but he did a pretty decent job playing bass here on this album. So it's a pretty decent record for what it is, I think. And I think by this point in time, and then the final album that or final single that I'll talk about, but they ended up actually releasing an album after this. So this is one of the singles that I own by them. This is also from my collection. This is, I forget the name of this single. It's in Japanese. So this is one of their singles here that was released sometime in the 2000s, and this proceeds into the album Loop, or not Loop. Yeah, what is the album? Lab. Getting my L's mixed up. So this proceeds into the album Lab, which was their last final studio album. It's a decent single. It's got 2 tracks, I believe, or 3. I haven't listened to it in a while. So this around this time was still being distributed under Mercury. Mercury was still under operation. And then that's it. So they kind of had their peak real quick. And like I said before in the last video, this is a thing that you see typically in the visual kei scene, is bands that jump, that they peak in popularity, and then all of a sudden it's like they hit this burnout, and then they don't know how to pick back up and pretty much go on to something else. So since the disbandment of ROUAGE, which happened sometime, I'd say, in 2001. So it's about 20 years ago that they disbanded. 21 years ago. So since that disbandment, the remaining 4 members, the vocalist, Kazushi, and the guitarist, Reiji, went on to form a group called Stray Pig Vanguard, and they ended up getting picked up and signed to Nippon Crown, and they released a bunch of albums and singles and whatnot, and I think they've kind of since stopped making music altogether. And then for a while, Rika was, wasn't really doing much, and he kind of disappeared off from the scene for a little bit. And then I'd say probably back in like 2006 or 7, maybe, he had a band that he formed a project called Dibs, and that didn't last for very long. So no one knows what these all 4 members are up to now. With COVID, it's kind of hard to tell. So, but yeah, they're a very good band, well worth checking out. One of my favorite Nagoya Kei bands. I'd say Laputa and ROUAGE are the 2 that are probably the most underrated acts that I could think of in visual kei, in Nagoya Kei in general, because mostly if you talk to any visual kei fan, you are going to get the response of, what's your favorite, you can ask them this question, what is your favorite Nagoya Kei band? And they're going to most likely say Kurayume. But for me, it's always been Laputa and ROUAGE. And those are my 2 favorite bands. And I liked Kurayume a little bit. They have a few good songs here and there, but I didn't really strike a chord with me as much as bands like ROUAGE and Laputa. So it's, it's kind of like, this is the kind of the history repeats itself sort of thing, is scenario, is that these bands just kind of, they'll peak really quick and then they kind of hit a brick wall. But then for me, what really draws me to this band is the guitar tones and the nostalgia behind it all. And they just had some really excellent material. So I definitely would check this band out. If you have not already checked them out, I know all their stuff, majority of their stuff is up and available for YouTube, on YouTube, to listen to. So you can give that a listen. Cheers.